There's a certain type of figure the internet knows how to manufacture with unsettling efficiency. He appears fully formed, authoritative, composed, speaking in clean frameworks about chaos. He explains the world, predicts its turns, and within months gathers an audience that treats him less like a commentator and more like an interpreter of reality itself. Professor Jiang is one of these figures. What makes his rise unusual is not just the speed, but the structure beneath it, the timeline, the institutions, the gaps, the reappearances. When you lay it out cleanly, without the aura, it doesn't read like a normal career arc. It reads like something routed through systems most people never see. Jiang's official biography begins simply enough. Born in 1976 in Taishan, China, he emigrates to Canada at 6 years old. He grows up in Toronto, and by his own accounts, he did not speak Mandarin growing up. His intellectual formation is Western. His academic training is not in geopolitics, intelligence, or economics, but English literature. In 1995, he enrolls at Yale. Yale is not just an Ivy League school. It has been famously described as a nursery of spooks with heavy CIA recruitment presence. It maintains an institutional pipeline into China dating back to 1901. Jiang's entry into China followed a highly specific path. In 1998, Yale's China Law Center sent scholars to China, many of whom helped establish foreign-funded NGOs that were later scrutinized for engaging in subversive activities. Yale is also home to the prestigious secret society, Skull and Bones. Welcome to Hidden America, where magic meets cybernetics and the code behind reality reveals itself. Act 1, 1997 to 2002, the pipeline years. In 1997, during Jiang Zim's visit to the United States, the Sino-U.S. Rule of Law Initiative is signed with Bill Clinton. What follows is a period of intensified academic and legal exchange between Yale and Chinese institutions. In 1998, Yale's law school, China's Law Center, sends scholars into China, many of them Chinese Americans. A number of those individuals go on to establish NGOs funded by National Endowment for Democracy, NED, an organization widely documented as operating in alignment with U.S. foreign policy objectives, including regime-shaping efforts abroad. That same year, Jiang returns to China for the first time, not as a student tourist, but as an intern teacher at Peking University Affiliated High School, one of the most elite secondary institutions in the country, and one with unusually close ties to Yale. The bridge between the two institutions is not abstract. It runs through figures like Phyllis Chang of the Ford Foundation, who played a central role in coordinating these exchanges while working within a network that also intersected with NED-backed initiatives. Jiang's placement inside that ecosystem is not random. After the internship, he returns to Yale, completes his degree, and then re-enters China, this time as a journalist. Act 2, Early Writings, a consistent line. Between 2000 and 2006, Jiang publishes a series of articles across outlets like Far Eastern Economic Review and The Nation. These writings are revealing, not because they are extreme, but because they are consistent. In 2000, he critiques China's healthcare system and emphasizes the necessity of NGOs, particularly those receiving foreign funding, to fill the gap. In 2001, he writes about labor unrest, suggesting that workers organize spontaneously with an undercurrent that aligns closely with Western narratives of China's impending systematic failure, popularized at the time by figures like Gordon Chang. Then came the incident that should have ended his career in the East. In 2002, while on U.S.-funded media assignment, Chinese police detained him. Chinese counterintelligence had concluded he was an American spy, and he was deported under suspicion of espionage, a fact Jiang openly admitted in a 2017 CNN article. That should have ended his access to China. But it wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. And that's where the story stops making sense. Act 3, the break in the pattern. In most cases, a foreign national suspected of spying and deported from China does not return to embedded positions within elite institutions. The system does not work that way. Yet, by 2008, Jiang is back inside China, not on the margins, but in positions of influence. He becomes a teacher, then moves into senior roles within elite educational institutions, including Shenzhen Middle School, and programs linked to Peking University and Qishang-affiliated schools. The man who had been removed under suspicion is now participating in shaping future Chinese elites. The principal who brings him in, Wang Zhang, is himself engaged in what he describes as a civic experiment, a model of education oriented towards cultivating globally integrated, politically adaptive students. Jiang's own writing from this period make the objective explicit, the cultivation of China's future elites. In his view, the Chinese should be trained through systems aligned with Western frameworks. He reinforces this through theory, citing figures like Steven Pinker and Dan Ariely, both friends of Epstein, arguing that China's domestic system can't produce true innovation or true elites. At the same time, he establishes exchange programs with Israel, framing the country as a world laboratory of creativity, again reinforcing a model of externalized intellectual authority. Jiang used Steven Pinker's theories to argue that Israel is the most creative economy in the world, and that students must visit Israel in person to truly experience and appreciate the immersive power of creativity. Jiang writes, Israel's success is due to it becoming a world laboratory, creating goods and technologies exported to the rest of the world. Jiang's teaching career roughly ended around 2014, just as China began cracking down harshly on overseas-funded NGOs. The pattern is not subtle, it is directional. Act 4, Afghanistan, the foreign policy layer. One of the more overlooked elements of Jiang's background is his work with the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan during the period of U.S. occupation. In a 2006 report, he emphasizes the importance of U.S. aid funding in stabilizing local health conditions. On its face, this is standard developmental language. In context, it aligns with a broader function, legitimizing U.S. presence and investment in foreign regions under the framework of humanitarian necessity. By this point, Jiang's career has touched multiple nodes: Yale, China's elite education system, Western media, UN-linked work in a U.S.-occupied country. Individually, each piece is explainable. Together, they begin to form a pattern. Act 5, Disappearance and Reemergence. After around 2014, Jiang's public footprint fades. This coincides with China's increasing restrictions on foreign-funded NGOs and tightening controls on external influence networks. Figures operating in gray zones between education, media, and international funding structures become harder to track. For years, Jiang largely disappears from view. This all tracks for our timeline. Then, in 2024-25, he returns, but in a completely different form. Now let's slow this down. I want to thank Metallicus for sponsoring this video. I don't take sponsors lightly, and I avoid platforms tied to centralized control or systems designed to consolidate power upward. That's why Metallicus is the only digital banking network I'm willing to put my name next to. As always, in Metallicus, I trust. Now let's get back to it. Act 6, Resurrection by Algorithm. In March 2024, a Beijing Normal University professor named Chen Zixing suddenly went viral across Chinese social media after releasing an open-access lecture series titled Introduction to Social Sciences. It was presented in traditional academic lecture format. The course introduced a range of controversial ideas, including claims aligned with Western pseudo-historical theories that challenged the credibility of established Western historical narratives. The material quickly ignited widespread debate and attention online, with Chen's account amassing roughly 1 million followers within a month of the videos going live. Within weeks of Chen's viral surge, a similar format began to emerge elsewhere, this time through Jiang. Jiang reappears not as an educator, journalist, or policy worker, but as a synthetic seer, a YouTube channel, a Substack, complete with a new identity, Professor Jiang. Yet let's be clear, the credentials behind the title have not changed. He still holds a bachelor's in English literature. He has never held a formal university professorship, yet the branding is clean, authoritative, and immediately legible to a mass audience. Within a year, his growth is explosive. That Substack account acquired a staggering 44,000 subscribers in half a year, becoming the #1 ranked Substack page in the world politics category. On YouTube, hundreds of thousands of followers turned into over 1 million, and now just over 2 million. His videos centered on game theory, geopolitics, war forecasting, and predictive history circulated widely. But the fact is, YouTube is by far the hardest platform to grow on, and when you do, you cultivate an extremely loyal following. This was a major red flag to me. You don't get this kind of push unless the system wants you to. In the past few months, he has been majorly mainstreamed and made to be seen as an oracle after he predicted major geopolitical events, including a potential Trump return and the conflict with Iran. But the reality is less impressive. His scenarios, or game theory, is extremely broad, derivative of existing policy discussions, and in line with publicly documented positions held by U.S. leadership for decades. What is more interesting is not the content, but the amplification. Act 7, Amplification, not discovery. Social media does not elevate content neutrally. Visibility is managed through systems of amplification and suppression, what platforms themselves refer to as boosting and deboosting. Jiang's rise shows the signature of amplification. A dormant channel suddenly surges. Engagement scales rapidly. Coverage from major outlets follow, reinforcing visibility. The feedback loop locks in. At the same time, inconsistencies appear. His YouTube account lists Canada, while videos show him teaching in China. His Twitter account claims Beijing, while back-end data places them in Hong Kong and Australia. Individually, these are minor anomalies. Collectively, they point to a distributed digital operation rather than a single static presence. Act 8, the cult formation. The most telling shift is not numerical, it is behavioral. The audience around the professor do not engage him as a commentator. They defer to him as an authority figure with privileged insight, almost as if he is a New Age prophet. The language and comment sections shift toward reverence. He is not just explaining events, he is perceived as seeing behind them. Jiang himself leans into this framing. He speaks openly about hidden systems, secret structures, and the possibility of building a new interpretive framework for understanding reality. At times, he goes further, describing his platform as a potential seed for a new religion. Jiang compares himself to the Apostle Paul, actively evangelizing and positioning himself as the central messiah of a new belief system. And this is not metaphorically, but structurally. His following is not just as audience, it is his base being cultivated for a new order. Act 9, the externalization of the hierarchy. Jiang's content does not just touch on hidden systems, it circles them relentlessly. Nearly every thread he pulls leads back to the same core themes: secret societies, concealed structures of power, and the idea that a small class of initiated individuals possess a deeper, more accurate understanding of reality. He frames this knowledge as something just out of reach for the average person, but accessible through the right lens, his lens. Over time, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. It isn't casual commentary. It's a worldview built around layered revelation. What sharpens the contradiction is his posture when pressed on the implications of that worldview. When confronted with the obvious parallels, particularly the language of illumination, hidden knowledge, and elite insight, he deflects. At one point, he claims he doesn't even know what Luciferian means. That would be an unremarkable statement coming from someone outside these circles, but from someone whose entire platform trades in esoteric framing, it lands differently. The vocabulary he operates within has a lineage, and it's not obscure. The closest historical parallel is Helena Blavatsky in the Theosophical movement of the late 19th century. Blavatsky's project was not simply to study esoteric tradition, but to reorganize them, to take what had been confined to mystery schools, enclosed philosophical systems, and repackage it for public consumption. She wrote openly about hidden hierarchies, advanced spiritual intelligences, and a body of knowledge preserved by an elite few. Her aim was not preservation, it was dissemination. Within Theosophy, this process became formalized as a doctrine, the gradual revealing of concealed knowledge to the broader population in order to reshape human consciousness. The term later used to describe this process was the externalization of the hierarchy, the movement of what was once hidden into the open, not all at once, but in stages through interpreters who could translate it for the masses. Read through that lens, Jiang's project takes on a different shape. The emphasis on hidden systems, the framing of himself as a guide through them, the suggestion that deeper truths are being unveiled in real time, even the cultivation of an audience that doesn't just listen, but defers. Whether intentional or not, the structure is familiar. The language has precedent in the role he is stepping into, translator of concealed knowledge, positioned between elite insight and public understanding, has been played before. Act 10, the pattern without the noise. At a certain point, the question is not whether every individual detail proves something definitive. It's whether the overall pattern is ordinary. A Yale graduate enters a long-standing U.S.-China institutional corridor. He participates in media and NGO-adjacent narratives aligned with Western policy interests. He is detained and deported under suspicion of spying. He returns and rises within elite Chinese educational structures. He disappears during a crackdown on foreign-linked influence networks. He reemerges as a mass media geopolitical authority with rapid algorithmic-supported growth. He cultivates an audience that treats him as a source of hidden knowledge. It seems like the skull and bones push may have worked. This sequence does not resolve into a clean, conventional biography. It resolves into something else. Act 11, controlled opposition or controlled narrative. There is a concept in intelligence and informational warfare often referred to as a pressure release valve. You allow certain narratives to surface, not to disrupt the system, but to channel dissent into controlled pathways. You create figures who appear to reveal hidden truths, but in doing so, shape the boundaries of what those truths are allowed to be. Whether Jiang fits this model can't be proven conclusively, but from open source information, his trajectory fits the architecture. This is Controlled Opposition 101. The professor sits at the intersection of East and West, critique and authority, exposure and control. He speaks in the language of revelation while operating through institutions historically tied to influence networks. And perhaps most importantly, he arrives at exactly the moment when audiences are primed to accept a figure exactly like him. Act 12, the conclusion. The modern oracle does not descend from a mountain. The digital seer is amplified by the algorithm. He is assembled credential by credential, platform by platform, narrative by narrative, until the image stabilizes and the audience fills in the rest. Professor Jiang did not appear out of nowhere. He came through corridors that had been in place for over a century. The only new element is the medium and the scale. The real question was never whether he is right or wrong. It's why this figure, this voice, this timeline, and this pattern was elevated and others were not. Because in a system built on visibility, what rises is rarely accidental. And once you understand that, you stop asking who the oracle is and start asking who built him.